have you on Fascinating Frontiers, episode 111 for June 24th, 2026. Here's your space and science briefing. An asteroid impact that ended the dinosaurs also sustained underground conditions for life 8 million years longer than earlier estimates. New dating of alteration minerals shows heated groundwater circulated for roughly 8 million years after the impact at Chicxulub. The system created a subsurface environment with liquid water, chemical gradients, and nutrients long after surface conditions stabilized. This duration exceeds earlier 2 million year estimates and widens the window for possible microbial colonization. Researchers will next search for biosignatures in core samples from the crater peak ring. The 8 million year duration stands out because it triples earlier estimates and greatly extends the period when liquid water and chemical energy could have supported life beneath the crater floor. Now we turn from one impact-altered world to galaxies reshaped by star formation with new views of the Cigar Galaxy. The James Webb Space Telescope's infrared data added to Hubble archival images now show both the dust-obscured core and the extended plumes of ejected material in the Cigar Galaxy. Rapid star formation triggered by a past merger is driving gas and dust outward, which will eventually star future generations of stars. The combined dataset reveals how feedback from young stars disrupts the disk on short timescales relative to the galaxy's overall life. Follow-up observations will track how quickly the outflow clears channels through the remaining gas reservoir. While M82 shows feedback in action, another Webb program has used infrared to count stars hidden behind dust in an edge-on spiral. Infrared observations pierce thick lanes of dust to map the thin disk and bulge structure of an unnamed edge-on spiral. The census provides a rare side-on census of stellar populations across the full radial extent. This view helps calibrate models of how dust and stars are distributed in galaxies viewed at other angles. Future papers will compare the star counts against simulations of disk formation. If every visible star in the Milky Way were switched off tomorrow, the galaxy would still shine brightly in infrared from the dust-concentrated stars we cannot see with ordinary telescopes. Dust grains absorb optical and ultraviolet photons and re-radiate the energy at longer wavelengths that pass straight through the same clouds. The James Webb Space Telescope's detectors are tuned to these wavelengths, allowing it to count individual stars in regions where visible light images show only darkness. In one recent observation, the telescope recorded 16.5 million stars across a single edge-on disk, whose visible appearance is little more than a thin dark line. That number comes from resolving point sources down to roughly the mass of the Sun at distances of several million light-years. Yet, even with these data, we still cannot say precisely how much additional mass remains locked in objects too faint or too deeply buried for current instruments to detect. The same infrared advantage that uncovers hidden stars is also letting astronomers watch a much earlier galaxy clear its own surroundings. Ultraviolet light from clustered young stars in MXD FZ 4.4 is ionizing and dispersing neutral hydrogen, both inside and immediately around the galaxy. The object existed when the universe was 1.4 billion years old. This is the earliest direct evidence that such compact starbursts helped end the cosmic dark ages. Additional spectroscopy will measure the exact fraction of ionizing photons escaping into intergalactic space. From galaxies clearing space around them, we move to a rover choosing where to look next on an ancient Martian lakebed. The rover's science team identified orbital texture differences and plans a short drive toward a smoother patch for closer inspection. The new site may expose different mineral assemblages than the rougher bedrock examined recently. Onboard instruments will measure chemistry and texture to test whether the change records a shift in ancient lake or wind conditions. The next planning cycle will decide whether to stop for contact science or continue toward higher strata. While Curiosity plans its next stop, we look back at how the Apollo crews once trained to read alien landscapes on Earth. Before their flights, crews practiced sampling and traverse planning in the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. a landscape shaped by volcanic ash flows. The exercises built skills for rapid identification of rock types and structures under time pressure. Lessons from those rehearsals shaped how astronauts documented samples returned from the moon. Archival photos and audio from the training are now part of a new public exhibit. From training on Earth to extreme environments in space, we examine one planet pushed to atmospheric limits by its star. The planet's orbit keeps one hemisphere under continuous high-energy bombardment from its host star. Models show the resulting temperature contrast drives strong winds that redistribute heat to the night side. The extreme conditions test the limits of atmospheric circulation theories developed for cooler giants. Ongoing observations aim to measure how the upper atmosphere expands and escapes under this forcing. From extreme planetary environments to the infrastructure that supports getting there, NASA's Inspector General has flagged capacity concerns at Kennedy Space Center. An Inspector General report warns that aging infrastructure and growing launch demand are straining the Florida spaceport. Multiple heavy lift vehicles now compete for pads, processing facilities, and range resources. The findings recommend near-term investments to avoid bottlenecks that could delay Artemis and commercial missions. NASA is reviewing the recommendations for the next budget cycle. While launch capacity is reviewed, Boeing has secured a major new satellite contract. The award covers 2 next-generation military communication satellites after a competition against Lockheed Martin. The spacecraft will provide protected wideband services for U.S. and allied forces. Work will build on Boeing's existing satellite production line in California. First launch is expected in the early 2030s. From new hardware contracts to the ongoing effort to return an existing crewed vehicle to flight. An uncrewed test flight remains in the testing and analysis phase before any crewed attempt. Internal schedules list a possible August window, yet officials caution that technical issues could push the flight into 2027. The companies continue parallel work on software and hardware fixes identified during prior attempts. A final readiness review date has not been set. While Starliner works through fixes, SpaceX has flown a new microgravity research capsule. The capsule performed controlled flight after deployment from Falcon 9 and will splash down in the Pacific. The demo validates a design intended for routine, lower-cost access to microgravity for experiments and manufacturing. Payload capacity and re-entry performance data will inform future operational missions. Additional flights are planned once the vehicle completes post-flight review. From U.S. commercial demos to an Australian hypersonic test. The Australian company completed its first hypersonic flight test as part of building defense-related launch capability. The vehicle reached speeds and altitudes relevant to future responsive launch concepts. Data from the flight will guide development of a larger orbital rocket. The test site offers proximity to existing range infrastructure. From hardware tests to the people and teams preparing the next generation. Student engineers advanced with a project focused on aerospace systems design. The team will compete against other universities in a final round later this year. Faculty advisors note the project builds directly on coursework in propulsion and avionics. Results will contribute to ongoing NASA education initiatives. Embry-Riddle Prescott advanced through multiple review stages with their aerospace systems design entry. The entry integrates propulsion hardware testing with avionics software validation in a single vehicle concept. Competition judges selected the team after evaluating technical documentation and preliminary hardware demonstrations. The final round later this year will require live demonstrations of integrated system performance under simulated mission constraints. From student teams to the weekly rhythm of launches on the Space Coast. The latest manifest lists upcoming Falcon, Atlas, and Ariane flights from Florida pads through the end of summer. Several national security and commercial missions remain on track despite earlier delays. Range and weather constraints continue to influence exact liftoff times. The schedule is refreshed weekly as vehicles move through processing. Additional Falcon heavy lift missions and an Atlas V national security payload are listed through August. Processing teams coordinate shared use of the Eastern Range, radar, and telemetry assets for each vehicle. While the manifest is updated, NASA has named a new Chief Information Officer. Gallagher, previously acting CIO, now leads the agency's full portfolio of information technology systems and services. His appointment is effective immediately and follows several months in the acting role. Priorities include modernizing legacy systems and supporting growing data demands from science missions. The move centralizes oversight of cybersecurity and cloud infrastructure across centers. Gallagher will also coordinate IT support for expanding commercial crew and science operations at multiple field centers. Keep an eye on the next Starliner readiness review as testing continues through the summer. That's Fascinating Frontiers for today. If you enjoyed this, a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify really helps new listeners find the show. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for exploring with me, and I'll see you next time. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network, links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Planetarian Daily a listen. Daily breakthroughs in science, health, and longevity. You can explore the whole lineup at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.
Drifting softly